Greetings, my fellow people, my fellow guardians. Welcome back to Crucible Circle, episode 2. Some Crucible Stasis changes. So what I want to talk about today, let's do a quick recap of last episode. We talked about Fail Winner's Lie. I went in a little rant, obviously, because it's a little bit obnoxious, blah, 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 blah. We talked about some weekly trials numbers. We talked about how many people actually played versus how many people typically played. Something I didn't say in that video was, I believe someone said that 192,000 people play Gambit in one day, and about 200,000 or whatever the number was, 250,000 people played trials in the entire weekend. So that is pretty interesting. So moving on to the second installment, the second episode of Crucible Circle. Let's talk about some stasis changes in the Crucible. Some things that could make it a little bit less obnoxious. So something I'm looking at here. Here are some of my suggestions, right? So I just want to get to it. So something I thought of is, clearly Stasis needs some changes, some adjustments as a whole. Things like the Duskfield grenade, sucking you in is a bit of a problem. What are some other things, like we talked about before? Shadow Dive. People say that the Titan slide is a problem. I don't see it as much of a problem as Shadow Dive, but I guess it would be an issue if you're not a Titan. I don't know. It has a cooldown. You can't just slide around endlessly, so I don't really see the issue. Maybe, again, I think it's the fragment that makes these stasis explosions larger. I think that is the general issue. Excuse me. Anyway, so let's talk about some of the changes I think could be made on top of some general sandbox changes. So if you think about the stats of our guardians here, we have mobility, resilience, recovery, discipline, intellect, and strength. And so I thought of an interesting way, right, to incorporate this. Into basically how they can adjust things with stasis to make it a little, like I said, less obnoxious. So they could do something along the line of stat increases, meaning more improved ability for combating stasis. So a good example is just say the higher the resilience, the less damage done you when you're breaking out of stasis. Is something that they said is what the case was. So right, so I guess it's something like that. It's either you break out of stasis quicker, or you take less damage when you break out. So if they've already got that for resilience, it's definitely something that can be done. So it's just, people always throw out these ideas and these suggestions, and they feel that Bungie, is, I guess, like everything's too hard for them to do. And I feel like since they've already put this in the game, they could probably improve on it, and maybe in this manner. So, using that as an example. So let's say the higher the recovery, the less effect slows have on you from stasis. In particular, for now, it could be stasis, but say whatever the new subclasses are, they're talking about corruption, things like that. You can add a similar effect for that, and burn and all those things, to kind of give the stats a little bit more of a meaning. Excuse me. So again, I even put here like nothing too dramatic, maybe a tick or two longer to get to the 9 times slow. So say it just takes an extra second or two. That is something at least meaningful enough that you could, escape, or, do whatever you do to combat stasis at that point. Put up your barricade, put down a ribs, pop your super, whatever it is. Give you an extra second to do so. It gives you a benefit for speccing out. So that's one example. And say at tier 10, right? The shattered stasis crystals do less damage to you. So if you get hit by a shadow dive, it leaves you with blinking health. It doesn't kill you, something like that. So they still have to at least melee you, those hunters, whenever they're landing on you. Another example is maybe the higher the intellect, the less time you're frozen in your super, or the higher the stat, the higher the damage mitigation, meaning you take less damage from stasis in your super on top of the already bonus that we have. And say at tier 10, a bonus would mean, this one's a little bit of a stretch, but maybe something along the lines of your super can't be frozen. Or your super can't be slowed, one or the other, something like that, along those lines for maxing out the stat. Another example would be the higher the mobility, the higher your speed when you are slowed. So again, slow has a little bit of less of an effect on you. Let's say at tier 10, whenever you are slowed, your reload speed is not affected, because as you know, whenever you are slowed, your reload speed is slower, your ability is all that. You just are obviously slowed until you're frozen. An interesting one I thought of for discipline. So I was thinking again of a way that it would combat stasis at the same time as actually staying true to the actual stat of building your grenade. So say for example, for discipline, the higher the stat, the less the overall damage grenades do to you in general. And again, nothing ridiculous, just not enough to kill you, something like that. Just knock damage down a couple ticks. Let's see, I'll put something else here. Yeah, nothing that can break the game, but something that can be valuable across the board in PvE and PvP. It will also carry forward and not need a huge amount of tuning when subclasses, new subclasses enter, or when older ones are updated. So, and for tier 10 discipline, say when frozen by a grenade, your grenade in turn is then recharged. So imagine that, you get hit by a dustfield grenade as a warlock, and immediately you throw your glacier grenade that blocks him from killing you, something like that. I think things like this, combined with some actual, tuning and regular adjustments and buffers, rounding out the edges of stasis as Bungie, gets more time under their belt with the subclass as much as we're getting. So I think those are some things that that could really, add to the game itself as an MMO aspect of speccing out your build, on top of giving you legitimate, positive results for speccing out your build. So, say you don't want to, if you're already running some kind of grenade build and then you pop that tier 10, whatever it is, discipline, and then you already have max grenades, you already have one up, and then say you're caught without one, then you get frozen, you automatically get yours back, you make a play, you got a clip, something like that, whatever it is. I think things like that, if they thought more so on that aspect of things, it'd be a little bit easier. It'd be a little bit more fun. What we as players are looking to do in the game is anything that has some meaning. Destiny players seem to really gravitate towards that. We love playing the game, but what we're asking for is just a reason to do it. And I'm sure people like myself, people like anyone would grind for high spec gear, especially if you're a Crucible player. You would definitely be grinding whatever it is to get that high spec gear if it meant you were more, apt to survive in the Crucible. And those things also have PvE implications, right? So hopefully Bungie will introduce some more enemies that use stasis, because if so, things like this would be wonderful, and then you wouldn't always have to switch up your entire build whenever you're going from PvE to PvP because of stats, because they have a dual benefit, I don't think it's a ridiculous amount to ask. I just think, Bungie might not go in that direction, but I think it's an idea. I think it's a start. I think that it would balance things. I don't know if Bungie really wants things to be balanced or not, but I think it would help people not be as frustrated. I think it would improve Crucible numbers. I think it would improve Trials numbers. If you at least had some sort of clear defined way that you could combat stasis, knowing it's so chaotic and so rampant in the Crucible right now. I really think that, that's something that would help Crucible players that aren't as good, and I think it's something that would help Crucible players that are mid-tier, because it just gives you a reason to go play. It gives you a reason to practice. It gives you a reason to get better. If you think you have a feasible shot of going to trials at the end of the weekend because you want X, Y, or Z, you would spec out your build because you know Stasis is so strong. It would also maybe bring light subclasses back in line. I mean, if you could really spec yourself out as a light subclass to have Stasis damage mitigation in general, or any of the other things we named, what do you think that would be like? That would be pretty awesome if you were running, I don't even know, I mean, say you're running the Sunbreaker, say you're running Sunspots, and you always get frozen to Stasis, but you get hit by a dust field grenade. It gives you your grenade back. You kill him with yours. Just as you're about to get out, you have a sunspot there. All of a sudden, you're making another play. You're healing up. You got damage. Things like that. Give yourself a chance. Something to be able to give ourselves a chance. 1v1 with Stasis. Let alone a 3v3 with one life. I mean, the rewards already aren't fantastic for flawless, so again, balancing the Crucible just a bit, I don't think would hurt. I don't think just a touch. I don't think it's too much to ask. I don't think they have to change much. They already were kind of on the right track with that thing with Gambit, but people thought that was a little too unique for some reason, or a little too, I don't know, weird. I mean, because no one wanted to play Gambit, so it was like, you put the only armor sets, legit armor sets you ever made, into the one activity no one wanted to play. So, if that shows you anywhere, gives you any hint of how they think, we'll see if this stuff happens. We'll see. I really hope that they do make some kind of changes like this, because again, I don't think that Stasis is the worst thing in the world. I just think you have to get used to it. I think you have to spec out for it as well. I mean, if you're not running 10 resilience, I don't know what you're doing. If you're not, and again, it's like the feedback of that would be, you shouldn't have to do all of that just to combat a subclass, and that's very understandable. But it's like, the reality is, we do. So, if you want to have any kind of shot at surviving in the Crucible right now, you just got to adapt. It's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, some of my buddies who weren't so great in the previous sandbox, obviously, even still using their light subclasses, have gotten a little bit better, just because the skill gap seems to have jumped a bit, because Stasis is so easy to use and so deadly that you really have to start being more and more and more aware of where enemies are, what they're doing, cooldowns, and all that type of thing. So, other than that, I think the sandbox is nice. The weapon sandbox is sweet. 120s, 600 auto rifles got tapped, but nothing more. Tapped right down in line as far as range and stuff like. As far as damage goes. I've been trying to get a Crucible roll on the Arctic Haze. Clearly it is a PvE gun, but again, trying to search for an energy weapon to use with that Astral Horizon, other than Posterity. I know that's a raid hand cannon that is energy, and it's 180, which is pretty nice. I've had to go up against it pretty often in trials, Crucible, and comp and all that. People seem to use that pretty often. I don't really know what comes on it, but it's killed me a little bit. Especially against 120s. I think 120s versus 180s are a very interesting matchup, because the range versus just the range battle in general, and the fire rate. It's just, it all comes down to hitting your shots, obviously, especially with 120s, because that recoil is off the chain. But it's interesting. They're good 1v1s that I'm seeing in the Crucible, that I've been in the Crucible. Obviously, the whole space, like I said, space magic, not using as much gunplay. that's a little much, you know. Always having an ability up because of stasis is a bit much, you know. I just think it's a little bit obnoxious for hunters. The warlock melee, I mean, people are sleeping on the fact that that thing still absolutely wrecks. Oh, drop something. It still absolutely wrecks. It still freezes you for like an entire second. They can only be so far to use it, so when they do hit you with it, you are dead, 100%. If you get hit with the stasis warlock melee, you're dead. Period. Unless you're playing against a baked potato. So anyways, I mean, then, kind of in closing, I guess, just I think, like I said again, some things that I just think it would be a good idea to incorporate your stats, to incorporate our loadouts, basically, to incorporate more grind into the game. You love to grind. The people love to grind this video game because the gunplay feels so good to play it. Shooting, you know, stuff all day. It's awesome. You know, that's why I love playing PvE on PC so much. Is because it feels great. Still feels good on console, but boy, is it a different world on PC. I'm trying to get some of this background. Whew. For a guy that's unbroken, being unbroken on console don't mean shite on PC. I also don't play very, very often. Like I said, Crucible on PC, so even trying to focus and kind of hone in and get at least some average gameplay was rough, especially in the afternoon, man. All these guys are on. I never experienced cheaters until today either. I mean, 2 aimbots, which was pretty lit, so that was cool. Killed him a couple of times, but yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. So hopefully they end up doing stuff like that. Hopefully they end up thinking, I mean, I'm sure that they are taking this break. I mean, they've been off for the past 3 to 4 weeks. I'm sure they've been taking this break, taking all the feedback in, like they always say they are. It just depends on what they're going to do with it. So we'll see what happens. Bungie, don't let us down. Don't let us down. So on that note, we'll end the Crucible Circle episode 2. I never said like, share, or subscribe in the last video, but you know, do that. That helps the channel, helps channels grow. It helps more people join the discussion. You know, it helps more people that love this game get into contact with each other, and it would help me out. So on the YouTube ground we go. Thank you for watching.